Welcome back to the No Code Conversations podcast. Today I'm joined by Cian Duggan, an engineer, a serial entrepreneur who sold an ESG business to Accenture back in 2022 and who's now working on the challenge of embedding agentic AI into global SMEs. On the side, he takes old classic cars and makes them electric and helps his psychologist wife, Samantha, market her new book. So Cian, it's great to have you. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you very much for inviting me along. Good series.
Fantastic. So I always like to start with a very simple question, which is how you got into entrepreneurship. What was your first venture?
I was maybe 12 years old and I grew some strawberry plants in my back garden and I sold them to my local garden centre. And that was a summertime thing. And I think the same winter I got some logs that we were burning for just like, burning in the fireplace. And I basically drilled holes, stuck candles in them, put a bit of tinsel on and sold them door to door around my local neighbourhood. So that was probably the start of it. And it kind of went from there through, brewing beer and selling it to fellow students in college. And then my first proper business in the kind of .com era when I actually raised about £1 million and built some software, internet software and stuff. So it just kind of went from there.
Fantastic. And talk to me a little bit more about the first serious startup, the first serious business that you raised money on. Where did that idea come from? Were you trying to solve a particular problem, or did someone just come up with an idea and you all banded together? How did that particular startup come about?
Yeah, so the internet was starting. So it was back in the mid-90s. I'd kind of traveled around the world for a few years, ended up working at Microsoft down in Australia and Vodafone and various places. And I came back to Ireland and I knew that the internet was going to be something interesting. And it was, one of those alco genius moments. So you're out, you're kind of having far too many beers and you think of all the mad ideas. And myself and my flatmate at the time, we decided, wouldn't it be great if over the internet you could get people to send you images and then you could print those images on a t-shirt. That was kind of where it started. And we thought that'd be a great idea, and using kind of JavaScript, which was relatively new at the time, to allow people to manipulate stuff on the internet. And then we realized that none of that really existed. So we ended up building what was in essence a precursor to Shopify. Yeah, so we built basically a Shopify. And then we realized that was only one part. Then you needed to get people to pay. So then we kind of built an early version of the kind of world pay, take payments over the internet, which we then ended up selling to a local bank in Ireland and stuff like that. So it started off with a drunken conversation about wouldn't it be great to be able to print T-shirts.
Fantastic. And how did that evolve from that initial idea to the MVP, to the first version of the product itself? What was that process like for you?
Well, I mean, at the time we were pretty young, so early 20s. So it started off by having a few conversations with people who might use the product. Then, unfortunately, we went into what I know now is a fairly classic trap of we started to drink our own Kool-Aid and thought that we knew stuff. And so we then started to build, and then I went out and raised a bunch of money from some early stage venture capital, and there weren't many of those in Ireland at the time. And then once we had raised money, we were one step removed from the necessity of selling something. And so we built something without selling it. So that was my first real lesson of don't ever build anything in isolation because, an MVP that doesn't have real customer or potential customer fingerprints all over it, yeah, not likely to succeed.
It's tough sell, isn't it? Yeah, you kind of launched to crickets. I mean, I've done the exact same thing. The first startup I built was in the SaaS space, in the social media automation space, and that was very much built in a vacuum of a good idea and extrapolating out that good idea and not really speaking to customers. And it was great fun, but it meant that when we hit the market, what we'd built differed dramatically from what actually people needed. So yeah, it's one of those things that I think it's just a classic founder mistake. Yeah, it's the mistake that everyone makes at least once, sometimes multiple times, because it is so easy to do.
Yeah. No, it really is. And particularly when you're funded, so I mean, I've had businesses where I've raised money in and I've had businesses which have been purely bootstrapped. The one that I sold to Accenture a couple of years ago was purely bootstrapped. We built that to nearly 200 people, a combination of kind of consultancy plus a global tech platform. And we were profitable every quarter. We just made sure that we sold stuff and then delivered it with a profit, and then reinvested the profit into the business growth. And it keeps it much tidier, neater. It keeps the cap table much better, and it keeps the honesty of what you're doing, because it's very clear if you're not selling something that somebody wants to buy, it becomes pretty clear pretty quickly, because it's existential for the business.
Yeah, it's interesting. So how did that shift your mindset? Was there a difference in mindset with the funded business versus the non-funded in terms of things you did in your day-to-day routine and how you approach the business? Talk to me a little bit more about that mindset.
Yeah, well, I suppose, if you raise money, then you're often focusing on spending that money. And it's very easy to believe your own hype, and you can have great conversations within the team and the product owner and the CTO and the commercial, and you all vigorously agree with each other about what the right thing to do is. But you haven't really sharpened the conversation sufficiently, and got often, it can be easy to not do the hard stuff. And the hard stuff is like asking someone, would you buy this? And then when they say yes, asking them, will they buy it? Which are two very different questions. Um, and if you're not having those really sharp conversations, and again, if you're not getting prospective customers to really feed into the product and what they really want, not necessarily building exactly what they want, because, as Henry Ford said, if you'd asked people in the 1900s what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. He built a car, totally different. So I suppose when you have a vision or an idea of what you want a future state to be to solve a problem, I think the most important thing is to continue getting validation that that problem is a big enough problem, and your solution is directionally is the right solution to solve that problem. And you don't get that from internal discussions. You only get that, in my experience, from talking to real people who might actually buy, and asking them will they buy it. Tell them to, even if they're only paying £10 or £100 or whatever it is, just people to pay something, because then they have some skin in the game, and then they've got a vested interest in your success as well. So I suppose all of that would boil down to sell something as fast as possible.
And was there a particular strategy that you employed to get those people into your sphere, into your environment? Did you outreach to them? Did you go to communities, groups? Like, how did you get those first set of customers, or even those first set of testers, people that you were speaking to?
So for most of the businesses I've set up, I've usually been part of a local business networking group. So, I mean, there are things like BNI, Business Networkers International, or kind of local equivalents thereof. And they're usually a good place to start, particularly, I mean, anyone who's starting a business when you don't have a big kind of professional network yet. They're a great place to go along and just like try and find people to talk to about your idea and about what you're trying to sell. And because groups like BNI and equivalents, they are set up to try and help people find customers. That's what they do, week in and week out. So that's what I did. And, once you get one or two, I mean, every conversation you learn from, you go from, 100 to 1 no's to yeses to 10 to 1 to 3 to 1 to, if you can get it to under 3 to 1 kind of conversations to signed orders, then you've got something. Then you've got a product or a service that has a reasonable chance, is what I found. But you just got to start anywhere. I mean, most of us start with friends and family, people we know, and they're usually the easier sales because people will be quite forgiving. And then you just go out from there. But yeah, building a network as quickly as possible.
So what's one decision you made early on that you'd change if you were starting everything over again today?
Across any of the businesses? So it's the same across all of the businesses I've done. I would get out and talk to people sooner. Don't let good enough be the enemy of just getting out and talking, yeah? And then continuing to talk to customers. So after you've got an amount of early validation, don't assume that that holds true. And that's actually particularly true today because, you know, the speed of change is definitely faster than right now than anything I've ever seen. You know, the ability to create content, to have ideas, you know, created and or challenged through, you know, any of the AI models, you know, the speed that software itself is changing, you know, the speed that the frontier models are iterating themselves is just unbelievable. I mean, a couple of years ago, I found myself saying to a bunch of the CEOs within my community that, you know, it was the case a few years ago that the capability of software was improving exponentially, but that the ability of humans and businesses to adopt the software or to use the software kind of happens linearly. You know, we as humans, we're not good at exponential stuff. Like the human brain doesn't seem to get exponential stuff intuitively, you know. Incremental changes and you know, checks, and you know, we're heuristic machines. We want to check, we want to do things and get shortcuts, and we want to get results quickly, and yet the amount we have to change to get the best results now, because the underlying software and the AI models are changing so fast, it's really hard for humans, and it's even harder for collections of humans, i.e. businesses, you know. So things are moving much faster than they ever have before. So I think it's now even more important than ever before to constantly be checking core hypotheses and core theses for any business, you know. And they include not just what you're, you know, what exactly are you selling to who exactly and why do they want it? I mean, they're always important questions to ask, but also how are you going to deliver that? And how you might deliver it today could be radically different than it was even possible to do yesterday because of the rapid changes in the capabilities of the software.
Absolutely. I think a lot of what we say to our clients now is the building part is a lot easier. That's not the challenge. The challenge is what's the moat around the business? What's the distribution? How are you going to get eyeballs on this thing? Because I think a lot of people, they focus very much on the actual build, and they don't focus on what's a distribution play, what's the go-to-market strategy, how are we going to get people in our avatar to care about this thing. That's the next challenge, I think, especially in this AI era where people can, to a certain extent, prototype their own ideas and projects. That's what we try and shift our focus towards now, is the go-to-market, the getting people to care about it.
I completely agree, and you've touched on two key important points there. One is distribution, and the other is a moat. You know, and you know, on the distribution side of things, there are so many different ways to get a message out and to get a product out to market now, and different approaches will work for different businesses, services, people, etc. You know, and there's lots of great kind of info on all of that. I mean, you're absolutely right as well. In fact, three things I think that I vigorously agree with. Number one, it's much easier to spin up a product now, for sure, whether you're using Bubble, Lovable, Claude Code, you know, I mean, there are so many ways to create an MVP, and even like a fully working or a working enough product to get out there that you can sell, you know, much easier. Then it's into distribution. And then the moat one is interesting, and it's kind of like, you know, the value of software. When it gets easier and easier to create software, then the value of IP within any code tends towards zero, you know. And it's similar with a moat. You know, it used to be the case that your moat would have been your size of a business or your technology, your IP, and all of those are kind of melting away. I don't know if you know a chap, Piers Linney. He was on Dragon's Den, and he's got a bit of an AI business. He had a very interesting post a couple of weeks ago on the different types of moats that he now sees can exist in new businesses being spun up. And so for anyone listening or watching this, have a look at that. Have a look at that post by Piers Linney. It was quite cool as well. He took a few days out, and I think he rented a house out in the country which actually had a moat, and so he took a photo of the house where he was, and then wrote the LinkedIn article on moats. So yeah, bit of fun.
Fantastic. So, talk to me a little bit about what you're working on presently. Obviously, we touched upon agentic AI at the very beginning. What's your focus at the moment?
Um, so when I'm not helping my wife try to market her new book and get onto like radio stations and podcasts and various things like that, she's a psychologist, and her first book just got published there a few months back. So that's quite fun. We're kind of working together on that, and that's like a little mini business unto itself. Um, and when I'm not working with Samantha, or I've got a business called Electric Vintage, we've taken 7 old cars, made them electric, and then now we rent them out to brands who want to have a different and remarkable way of telling a message. It's basically it's a marketing business. So those two are probably taking, 20, 30, 40% of my time on most weeks. But the majority of my time is on AI, and specifically, actually, if I just do a little bit of a sidebar, I've been around AI for like 15 years. I mean, okay, 15 years ago it was more just machine learning and all that kind of stuff. But, we had big data sets in that business I sold to Accenture. At one stage, we had the world's largest data set of buildings, kind of carbon, energy, water data. And so then we were trying to use kind of AI techniques to get sense and insights out of that data. So, from there through to, more kind of real AI, you might call it, like a few years ago, starting obviously when ChatGPT came out at the end of 22, that was a game changer. And so at that point, then myself and my previous CTO of a business, we kicked off a business called Order, which was short for Augmented Leader. And the version 1 of that, we raised a bit of money into that. Do you know what? As you said at the start of this as well, sometimes we make the same mistake twice. We raised a bit of money and we started building a product. And we didn't stay close enough to our clients, our prospects. And we also then realized about 12, 18 months in that the speed that the frontier models were building at meant that it was going to be hard to compete. Even if we raised another 5, 10 million and kind of really went hell for leather, it was going to be a hard thing. We were building voice first persistent memory AI to help kind of medium-sized businesses to understand what was really going on within their business. But now, of course, you chat to Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini or any of them, and they all now have got reasonably good persistent memory, and you can do voice first with all of them, very, very successfully. So that problem is now solved. 3 years ago, voice first persistent memory wasn't solved. Now it is. What I see the problem or the challenge now, and I particularly like to work with kind of leaders of medium-sized growth businesses, medium-sized businesses, kind of, between 30 and 300 or between 50 and 200, even more specifically, kind of headcount. I like working with those businesses because what I can see is that they're really at risk, in this new AI world. They're kind of getting squeezed from two sides. There's the big companies who can now spend millions on AI projects and can now start servicing smaller companies and companies in different geographies that they weren't able to before, because AI can help the big companies to do that, go down into different markets. But these mid-sized companies, they're also getting squeezed from the bottom up because, you, me, anyone with an entrepreneurial bent can, 3, 4, 5 of us can join together, and now we can spin up a fully AI agentified startup that can do the service and product that used to only be possible with a 50 or 100 person business can now be serviced by a 5 or 10 person business. So these mid-level businesses, which is where most of the employment, most of the taxes raised for our economy, most of the purpose for most people in the UK and globally, these small businesses where all of that lie, and they're getting squeezed from the top and the bottom. So what I'm looking to do at the moment is to help these leaders, first of all, understand what a future state might look like. So you're a 100-person business right now. In 2 or 3 years, you could be a 100-person business doing 2 or 3 times the revenue, but still only 100 people. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you probably have every person within your organization who's got 3, 4, 5 agents doing parts of their job, And that's a hell of a lot more complex organization to run, because you're not running an organization with 100 entities, all human. You're running an organization now with 600 entities. 100 of them are human, 500 of them are agents. And how the hell do you govern that? What's the governance? What does that do to the people? How do the people have to change? So you've got a governance layer issue. Never mind all the new, rules, regulations, etc. Both mandatory and voluntary. So you've got a governance problem, you've got a people problem, and really it starts with the people in the middle. And then you've got probably data. You've got a data issue and a data layer problem as well, because it's not just people and traditional software accessing your data. It's agents accessing data, talking to other agents, exchanging data between them. How do you govern all of that? I mean, the playbook doesn't really exist at the moment. So that's what we're doing at the moment. We're starting with people. When I'm talking to my CEO clients and prospects, it's starting with the people layer, because that's where the fear is at the moment. I don't know if you've seen recently, Reese, there was a Stanford report came out. Did you see that one? That,
Doesn't ring a bell.
The state
No.
of AI. No?
Oh, okay.
We're
Potentially.
Yeah, worth having. And basically it's just talking about, I mean, if I was to put it in one word, fear. There's a huge amount of fear out there. People have fear that they're going to lose their jobs. They're going to be told to do something they don't want to do. They're going to lose parts of their job that they quite like doing. They might be using AI too much and they're going to get told off. They might be using it too little and they might be told off. There's a pervasive sense of fear, it seems, and that's difficult for any business. It's difficult for any leader. So that's where we're starting. We've got a product called Clarity, which basically kind of, combination of humans plus AI, talk to everyone in your organization, understand where you are, get an accurate diagnosis of current state from your people perspective, and then look at where you can go from there. Get your narrative correct. What are you telling your people as a leader? What are you telling your clients and your investors about AI? And then do your people believe you? Are you training your people sufficiently? What do they need to be trained in? So these are the kind of problems I'm working on at the moment. Starting with people and then going up to governance and then down to data.
Fantastic. And where can people follow you? For anyone who's listening, maybe they're interested in having a conversation around this, where can people follow you or find out what you're doing next, or even just support you? Have you got a website, LinkedIn? What's the best way of getting in contact?
Yeah, all those things. Our website is audr.com. So I paused it while we kind of stopped doing the first version of Order, but now I'm just resurrecting it again. So by the time this goes live, order.com, AUDR. Order, actually, just so you know, it's a shortened of augmented leader, because this is what I think needs to happen. Leaders need to become augmented with agents and AI in general, yeah? But order is also an old Norse word meaning prosperity, wealth, and abundance, which is kind of cool, I think, yeah? So order.com, AUDR.com. And obviously I'm on LinkedIn as well as Cian Duggan. And I've just recently started, I've done one or two things on Substack, so doing a little bit on Substack, and because my wife is doing a lot of stuff on Instagram and those kind of more social media, I'm kind of looking at Instagram, but I'm not really there. So LinkedIn and website.
Perfect. Fantastic. Well, Cian, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. I really appreciate the time.
Likewise. Thank you very much, Reese. It's been wonderful. Good luck with what you're doing. I think you're doing a great job. Doing a really, really excellent job.
Really appreciate it.